Hey there, sexy techies.
Hey, everybody.
So we are at episode 12. How exciting.
12. Ooh, TB12.
Dirty dozen. Are we just saying things that remind us of 12?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. I wasn't sure where you were going with that. But I've really enjoyed this podcast. I don't know about you, but...
Are you talking to me or the audience when you say that?
No, you. Well, yeah, actually both. But I've really enjoyed, like, getting to know you all over again because, I mean, we've been together for, we've been together for 19 or 20 years?
2004, yeah, 19 years.
19 years. Oh my gosh, we're almost at the point where I've known you longer than I didn't know you. Isn't that crazy?
That's nuts.
In life. Anyway.
Time flies.
Time flies when you're doing a podcast. So what I love about this is that, yes, I've known you for like 19 years. However, every time we do a podcast, I feel like I learn something either new about you or I just rediscover something that, you know, I kind of just stored away in the back of my mind about you. So I thought that maybe it would be a good time to talk to you about something that I don't know if a lot of people really understood or knew about you, because you kind of mentioned that you've been in Y Combinator or YC like a few times on this show. It was a time that I wasn't with you, like, really. So I would love to hear a little bit. I mean, I've heard you talk about it, but it'd be really cool for you to just kind of do an episode where you kind of like explain a little bit about what Y Combinator is, like how it works, and we'll do it kind of like interview style. Like I'll be like Andy Cohen from those Bravo reunion shows, and I'll interview you.
Okay, I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. So May approached me with this idea, and I think it's a good one. I get questions from a lot of people about, you know, what was that thing that you did in San Francisco? And, you know, that's for people who don't really know what Y Combinator is, but people who do, you know, they ask, so what did you do in Y Combinator? And just tons of people on the internet want to know, you know, what goes on and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I think hopefully this will be a good episode. Hopefully it'll be entertaining, but hopefully it'll be useful for, you know, people who actually are thinking of applying or just don't know what it is and want to learn more.
Yeah. So let's just start with the very basics. What is Y Combinator? Actually, how do you spell Y Combinator? Because in my mind the whole time I was thinking it's WHY.
No, you weren't. Okay. So it's just the letter Y. And then it's just like it sounds, Combinator.
Yep, Y Combinator. Do you happen to know what that Y stands for?
It's basically just a computer science thing that, you know, only the nerdiest of nerds would know what it means.
Okay, got it. All right. So
it's kind of like Hoya Saxa for computer scientists.
Okay, say no more. Yep, yeah. It's really cool, you guys. Okay, so what is Y Combinator?
Yeah, so Y Combinator is a startup accelerator that primarily invests in early stage companies. It was actually the first startup accelerator ever created.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was founded, basically Y Combinator pioneered this space, this sort of new thing, which is investing in early stage companies and providing them with guidance and sort of like almost like a boot camp type style of program. It was founded by 4 co-founders. I've mentioned Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston on this podcast before.
Right.
The 2 others are Trevor Blackwell and Robert Morris. Y Combinator operates 2 batches per year. A batch is just a group of companies that
like
they fund.
Like a class or something, like the class.
Yeah, it's like a cohort
of
companies. They are 3-month programs that happen out in San Francisco. Currently, there's about 200 to 250 companies that they invest in each batch. If people, you know, for developers, the Hacker News website is run by Y Combinator. It's one of the most popular websites for software engineers and developers.
Right. I've heard of Hacker News. I didn't realize that it was associated with Y Combinator.
Yeah, the domain is news.ycombinator.com.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. I didn't look at the domain. I just knew.
No, just letting everybody else know. So, I mean, if you want to learn more about Y Combinator, just to preface this all, I'm not employed by Y Combinator. I'm not a partner at Y Combinator. I was a founder that went through Y Combinator. So I was, my company was invested in by Y Combinator. And so I have my experiences to share and, everything that I've learned through the research that I've done, other founders that I've talked to. But, go to ycombinator.com. They have a lot of information there. Also, just if you're interested in startups in general, check out paulgraham.com. And one of the first links at the top left is something called Essays. He's like the most prolific writer on startups that there is. Oh. So if you want to learn basically anything there is to learn about running a startup, starting a startup, finding a co-founder, investing, how investments in startups work, all that sort of stuff, check out his site.
Yeah, no, that's probably really interesting information. So like just the credibility of Y Combinator, can you speak to like any of, I don't know, some companies that have gone through Y Combinator, maybe even like some people that we might have heard of, I might have heard of?
Yeah, I can give you several that most, if not everybody listening would probably know of. Some we've already talked about in the past.
Yeah.
So Airbnb is
right.
one.
Yeah.
Twitch is another that we've talked about. Reddit.
Oh, okay. That started at Y Combinator?
Yep. Reddit was in the first batch of Y Combinator, the very first one in summer of 2005.
Okay.
Instacart and DoorDash were both Y Combinator backed companies.
Do you know if they were in the same class or anything?
I think they were about a year apart. I think they were a year or so apart.
That's
like
interesting.
2012 and 2013 or so, around then. Don't quote me on that, but you can look it up.
Okay.
So Y Combinator will invest in companies that are in the same space.
Yeah.
There are other examples of that as well. Mixpanel and Amplitude are two like analytics type companies that are both huge and were invested in by Y Combinator. Just some others are Stripe, Zapier, Coinbase, if people are into crypto investing. That's one of the largest online exchanges for crypto.
Yeah.
Dropbox.
Okay.
Another. Those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But there's like, they've been at this for 18 years, so like they've invested in like 4,000 companies at this point.
And are they all, I guess, like tech-based, software, app-based, or are there like actual hard physical products that they also invest in?
They invest in any company really. A lot of them are software.
Yeah.
There are plenty of hardware companies as well. I think there was one in my batch that was working on like flying, like hovering motorcycle type things or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's very like Back to the Future. I don't know, like punk.
Yeah, there was another one in my batch actually that was you know how you go to the salon and get your nails done? It was basically like a machine that automated that. So
that's
like,
so cool.
Yeah, so like you put your hand in this machine and
Yeah.
I guess you go on the computer and say what you want for a manicure.
Yes, that's what it's called.
the painting of the nails.
You look so confused.
And it does it. So
that's awesome. I feel like I've even like seen an ad for that on Facebook or something.
Yeah, I don't know how
if
they're
it's the same
doing
one.
or if that company's still around or what, but
Yeah.
so all sorts of different companies.
So how do you get in? Like these 200 companies that are accepted out of how many? Like how do they get in?
Somewhere between 10 to 20,000 companies apply each batch. So twice a year.
That's insane.
And they accept a couple hundred. So I think the latest statistics were somewhere around 1.5% to 2% of the companies that apply get in. So it's really, there's only two steps. So you apply, you fill out an application on their website. You have to create an account on Y Combinator. You fill out this application. There's written questions about your company and you and your team. You submit a video introducing yourself to your... Yeah, do you remember?
I remember helping you with that video.
Yeah, so my co-founder actually lived in the Boston area, and he flew down here so we could film it together.
Yes.
May helped out with recording, and then we did several takes. And
yeah, like I was like, I don't think you guys should be leaning back so much. I think you should be going forward. And I think that's what it was
well,
that got
your
you.
advice paid off. So at the application stage, actually, they just had an application deadline, I think, last week. So they take a few weeks to review all the applications, maybe almost a month or so, and they send you an email and let you know if you got in or if they'd like to interview you. You'll either get an email saying, yes, we'd like to interview you, or no, not this time. Try, like, you can apply as many times as you want. And many people do and don't get in on the first time and then get in later.
Okay.
So, I mean, with only, 1.5 or 2%,
Right.
the largest probability is that you're not going to get in, especially on your first try.
Are people trying with the same product multiple times, or when they apply again, they have a different idea?
Both happen. Actually, though, when I knew a company, I knew the founders of a company that were applying to the same batch that we got into, and they did not get into that batch, but they applied again the next batch and got in. So I think they had more traction.
Yeah.
They'd figured things out a little bit more.
Yeah. Right.
They'd, sort of just, I don't even know if it was traction. We'll talk about, that sort of stuff too, but there was something different about their application, their interview, and they
Right.
got in the second time.
Nice. Awesome. Okay.
And then the second part is the interview. So if you get invited to an interview, you fly out to San Francisco. You meet with a few of the partners at Y Combinator. I don't know if it's always 3. I think it might be 3 or 4. In our case, it was 3.
Okay.
And you get like a 10-minute interview with the partners. They pay for your travel and expenses out there. They reimburse you for it. So yeah, I mean, they're asking you questions. They're asking you tons of questions. It's 10 minutes, and they're trying to get as much
Right.
information out of you, and also just to get to know you as best they can in that 10 minutes.
Yeah. I'm like envisioning like Shark Tank style, like where are you presenting to them, or are they really just asking you questions based on something that they've reviewed before?
Yeah, it's not really like Shark Tank. Shark Tank's more for TV,
You
but
just like burst my bubble.
So, well, they've already seen you include a demo video
Right,
demo in your application, and you include like the link and any login credentials that they'll need to use your if it's a prototype or anything like that. So they've already been able to play around with it. They've been able to read about what you're doing. They're mostly just asking questions in this interview.
Yeah, like more clarifying things.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So you were like one of the lucky ones that got in on the first try of doing this. Like this, it was your first time applying. You got in. Do you have any like tips for people who want to go through YC?
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself very fortunate to get in at all, never mind just on the first try.
Yeah.
I had been thinking about applying to Y Combinator for, I don't know, probably almost 10 years at that time. And I would advise people to not wait that long. I felt like I didn't have the right idea, or, I didn't have the right co-founder, that sort of stuff. It's easy to make up excuses, but eventually once I decided like I really wanted to do it, I figured that stuff out. So, I mean, I'll say a few things about just tips for people, I guess on the application side and on the interview side. One is, I mentioned they get 10 to 20,000 applications per batch, which means they are just reading a ton of stuff. You have to figure out a way to stand out.
Right. It's like a college essay. Like what do you do to stand out?
Yeah, it kind of is like a college essay, except much more brief. You want to be brief, you want to be concise, you want to have some sort of key insight about your market that others are overlooking, basically. You want to explain why your market is big or why it's going to be big in the future, and like other people aren't, something other people aren't seeing about the space that you're going to grow your business in. Team is super important. It's probably the most important thing for an early stage company that Y Combinator is looking at. Even more important than your idea. The team and the market that you're working in, or that you're building in. So they're going to want to see, that you can build the thing that you're doing. So,
Okay. Interesting. So do you have to be an engineer to get in?
No, you don't have to be an engineer, and certainly not everyone on the team has to be an engineer. You can be a designer, you can be a product manager, you can be
Because you weren't. Well, I mean, you dabbled in like
No, yeah, I mean,
coding.
I was an engineer. I didn't work it wasn't my day job,
Right.
but I know how to code.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I know how to build things, but yeah, it helps to have past experience. Like that's like if you've built past projects, even if it's nothing that's gotten huge, but you can show them, oh, I can build things pretty quickly. That's what they're going to want to see because you're going to, when you're building a startup, you're changing, you're iterating so often, especially if you haven't found product market fit. Like if you don't have a product that meets a need yet and your, sales aren't easy to come by, then you might be changing your startup multiple times while you're in the 3-month batch.
Right.
We kind of did that in a sense. We stayed in the same market, but the product kind of shifted.
Yeah.
And then get feedback on your application. Share it with friends. Make sure that somebody who does not understand your market or your startup, like especially if it's technical, make sure they can understand when they're reading it because, just because these founders, these partners at Y Combinator get all these applications doesn't mean they're necessarily experts. They're all experts in every field. So like you might be building something in some crazy industry, maybe you're doing something in, I don't know, in astrophysics or something like that. And they may not have an astrophysicist on staff. So I'm sure they'll have more familiarity than most people, but like, don't use buzzwords, and be concise. Also, reach out to past YC founders to review your application.
Where can they find them? Is it just like a Google thing?
Threads. You can go on Threads or Twitter. If you search for Y Combinator or YC founder, that sort of thing, you can find people. Usually around the time that applications are due and interviews are happening, you'll actually find YC founders on Twitter. And I mean, Threads is brand new, but I assume this will happen on Threads too, where YC founders are saying if anybody needs help with their application, or more often it's with the interview. So like once they've narrowed it down and selected you for an interview, if you need help prepping for the interview, it's great to get as much practice as you can. And especially from somebody who's gone through it before, they'll know how to like ask you questions in the same way and try and, throw you off.
I kind of remember you doing like some practice sessions.
Yeah,
with
we
people.
probably did 10 different practice interviews with former founders and just anybody that we could.
Did you feel like their feedback was pretty consistent, or were there like conflicting like feedback that you would get?
I mean, when you're in the interview, there's 3 partners there. At least there were for us. And 2 were bombarding us with questions. The other one was basically just observing. And one of the things that they want to make sure is, so they're also watching your body language. They want to make sure that you don't get flustered easily. And they want to make sure that you don't get defensive, that you're open to feedback. So they're gonna try and trip you up. And I mean, they're really good at interviewing.
Kind of get under your skin a little bit or frustrate you.
Yeah, and just see how you react because they want people there who are willing to take their advice
and like level-headed founders. Yeah. But in terms of your practice with other YC founders, you said that you had 10 different like practice interviews. Did you feel like the feedback from those people were consistent, or did you get like conflicting feedback? Like, did they know the YC model pretty well to like be able to advise consistently? To some degree. Nobody's perfect. And I mean, this was 5 years ago at this point too, so I don't remember exactly. Right. But in general, it was helpful. I mean, it was just helpful to get as many sort of reps in as we could. Right. Okay. So you kind of talked about how, you were thinking about going into YC for 10 years at that point, and you're like, I should have gone in sooner. Why is that? Well, I just think I should have applied sooner. I think when you look at the application, it can be a little intimidating, and you can decide not to do it just because you think, oh, I'll never get in. Okay. And if you have that mindset, then you're just never going to do it. Right. So I just meant that
it's worth doing it just to like, and the Y Combinator partners say this too, like filling out the application is a worthwhile endeavor in itself because it asks you a lot of questions that get you to think deeply about your company and the market that you're operating in.
Yeah. And
that's just a useful exercise for anybody who's starting a company.
Right.
You don't need to create a business plan. And that's a common misconception and question that people ask. We didn't create a single business plan. Business plans for tech startups, early stage tech startups, are basically a waste of time. They take a long time to create, and
they usually change.
Yeah, and you could be using that time building your product and talking to customers.
Right.
Like that's what you need to be doing.
That makes sense. I get that. So yeah, the reason I asked that because I didn't know if it was an age thing or not, because I did go and visit you on the tail end of your journey out there, and we hung out with some founders that we met, and I felt like we were the geriatric group at the time, and that was also 5 years ago, so like we weren't old, but like the demographics that I saw, I felt like you were one of the older ones, but didn't they call you like grandpa or something?
I don't think so. I think you're just making that up.
Okay, maybe I just tease you about that. But like, is it all people just out of college?
So I was 33 I think when I went through Y Combinator. No, it's not all people right out of college. That is a large percentage of people, just out of college age, or, some drop out of college to start companies.
Right.
Not a huge percentage. But yeah, there's a lot of people in their early to mid 20s. I think it's easier to do at that stage of life. You have fewer responsibilities, if any.
Right.
You can, if you don't live in the area, it's easier to move there.
Yeah.
That's another reason that, I would have liked to have tried to get in earlier. I mean, life is less complicated when you're in your early to mid 20s than it is when you're in your 30s and have kids and have a house and a mortgage and, all that stuff. So yeah, but no, there were people in our batch, and there are people in every batch that range probably from late teens to 60, maybe even 70 years old.
Wow, late teens. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm just like thinking of myself as a late teen, and there was no way that I was like starting a company or a business. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's admirable.
Maybe, they graduated high school and had an idea for a company and were great engineers and that sort of thing.
All right. Well, that's really great. And so, after the interview process, what actually happens like once you get in? I mean, from my perspective, it was my husband left for 3 months. Then he came back so happy.
So if you get accepted and you decide to participate in the program, Y Combinator currently they invest $500,000 in your company.
Wow.
And they get a 7% equity stake in your company. So they own 7% of your company.
And that's non-negotiable. Like that is what it is when you sign up to go.
Yep.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter where you are in your company. They, it's standard. It makes it easier for them and for everybody. They don't have to negotiate every deal. And they also get the right to invest in future rounds, along with other investors. So if you decide you're going to raise another round of funding and Y Combinator wants to invest, they get the right to do that. That dollar amount has changed over the years. I think, in the first batch, we talked about this in our Twitch episode, I think, but back then they were investing, it was like per founder.
Yeah.
They gave a certain amount of money. And I think it worked out to be somewhere around like 20 grand for the team, if there was a team of like 3 founders.
Yeah.
Now it's 500,000.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And with that 500,000, they changed their standard deal last year. So they actually increased the amount of funding. If you do go on to raise another round, I think in your next round, they also get a small percent of your company. So when I was in Y Combinator, I think they invested $150,000 for 7%. It's always been 7%.
Okay. Interesting. So I know you said like it doesn't really matter like where you are like in your business, like it's the same amount. Do you already have to have sales in order to get in, or like could it be like this pipe dream that you've never pitched to anybody? Like what's like the spectrum that we're looking at?
No, you don't have to have sales. Plenty of people get in with just an idea. I mean, it's more than just an idea. Like you have to have the idea and usually you have some sort of prototype or sketch or something demonstrating, that you have that like, what you're going to build.
Okay.
It's much easier if you have at least like a working demo, but not everybody does. And as far as sales, I looked up the statistics for the last batch that there are statistics for. So the winter 2023 batch, 77% of the companies had no revenue when they started Y Combinator.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of faith.
Yeah. So the barriers to being accepted are probably lower than people think in terms of like traction and how far along they need to be with their product.
Right.
But they're still, they're not low though, because of how many people apply and how low the acceptance rate is.
Right.
And, you still have to be a great potential founder, or already founder. And, they have to see something in you and the space that you're working in.
So then after like the 3 months of a batch, do you know how many companies, actually maybe don't succeed at the end of the batch, like they fold, versus like others that continue to move on?
Well, Y Combinator is now investing $500,000 in your company. So that should last you a while.
Yeah.
So I don't think too many companies are folding. Some companies are extremely expensive to operate, especially like hardware companies, or, think software companies usually don't fit in this category. If you're building something that's just really expensive to build because of the materials or whatever, then, you could burn through that pretty quickly. But no, I don't think very many companies just die at the end of the batch. And if they do, it's not because they ran out of money. It may be because of co-founder conflicts. Maybe they just realize that their initial, what's more common is you realize that your initial idea is not viable for whatever reason, and you pivot to something else.
Right.
But that's part of the reason that they invest that amount of money in you, is like you need a fighting chance to make this company work.
Yeah. So you have the time to kind of explore.
Yeah. Right. In case, most companies don't end up doing exactly what they applied to Y Combinator to do.
Sure.
They pivot into something else, sometimes a related field, sometimes something completely different.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Just an example, with Twitch, right? They applied, they had applied, the founders had applied once before that, two of them, to create a calendar application software.
Right.
That didn't work out. They applied again. They applied with Justin TV to film Justin Khan's life and put it on the internet, and that morphed into Twitch, which just lets people live stream video games on the internet.
So, for those who apply and get that, initial investment and get in, like what happens after you get in?
You are required to live in the San Francisco Bay Area for 3 months, for the 3 months of the batch. That requirement was lifted during COVID, so they still ran batches during COVID, and they were remote.
I was going to ask you about what happened during COVID.
Yeah, now they're back in person. And so you have to move out to the San Francisco Bay Area, which I did in 2019. It lasts for 3 months. So this is in addition to the investment. This is like what else you get from Y Combinator, basically. One is you do bi-weekly group office hours with your partners at Y Combinator. The partners are the founders of previously successful companies. Either they went on to exit to, they became public companies, or they sold to another company. Yeah, they were acquired, that sort of stuff. There's typically like 6 or 8 companies in your section. Like they split out companies into smaller groups. Mm-hmm. And so you meet with the partners. You'll talk about your metrics, how you're doing on your, with your metrics, because you'll have defined goals coming in from the last session. You'll talk about any problems that you're facing. You'll get advice. You'll hear what problems other companies that are similar, they try and group people together in similar spaces, mm-hmm. so you can learn from each other. Mm-hmm. And you set goals for the next couple of weeks. And then you spend most of your time building your product. But then they do weekly dinners where they will cook they'll cater in for the entire batch. They used to actually cook when it was
Oh my gosh.
smaller, when it was just 10 or so companies. They have these talks that are given by the founders of current companies that will come in and talk to the founders. A lot of times they're current, a lot of times they're Y Combinator companies. Like when I was there, the founders of Airbnb, Brex is another company, Docker, and they come in and share their stories and answer questions and that sort of stuff. One of the other big benefits of Y Combinator is demo day.
Yeah.
So at the end of the 3 months, there is what they call a demo day where Y Combinator assembles basically like all of the A-list venture capitalists and investors from around the country and around the world come to San Francisco to hear the pitches of these 200 plus companies. And Y Combinator preps you for that event. So they help you figure out what to value your company at, how much you should raise or try and raise. They help you work on your presentation, how to work, they help you know how to work with VCs. It's basically like it's kind of like the Super Bowl of venture capital investing. If it was like a 1 day, actually it's 2 days because the batches are so big. So they split it into two separate days.
Is it like different audiences for each day?
I mean, some investors might come to one day and not the other if there are specific companies they're interested in, but most would come to both days.
Did you meet a lot of VCs at demo day? Like, how was your demo day, I guess?
Yeah, so basically we went on stage for, I can't remember exactly how long the presentations are. They're only a couple of minutes. So, we get up on stage, we present to an audience. There are actually a couple of presentations going on at once in different rooms, basically. Yeah. Okay. So, there's a pool of investors that choose to be in that room at the time. Usually, especially for the larger VC firms, they'll have multiple investors there so that they can have somebody in each room, so that they have somebody listening to all the presentations. And you do your presentation. After you're done, investors that are interested in your company sometimes will come like right up to you and start talking to you, asking you questions about your company and how much you're raising. I mean, you say that in your pitch anyway, but you talk about those things. Other times you're just walking around, like it's like a networking event, also. So you're just bumping into other investors. Some of the investors are past Y Combinator founders. So sometimes they're just interested in what your company's doing. So you're getting advice, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's like one big networking event, / deal making event. A lot of deals are done right there. Some of them are done before demo day. Some people start meeting with investors even before demo day.
That's like legal, allowed.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of it's allowed. You can do whatever you want. It's your company, but it just depends on what stage you're at, really. Right. For most companies, it makes more sense to spend all that time building your company because the more traction you can get by demo day, the more your company's going to be worth. Yeah. So if you're spending all your time, I mean, raising venture capital is like a full-time job. So if one of your founders is spending all their time doing that, I mean, they basically have to be spending all their time doing that. And that means they're not writing code. They're not making calls to to potential customers. They're not growing your business, basically. So most of the time, the deals are done after demo day, but like the introductions happen on demo day. But some close, that same day.
So do you ever meet like any like potential investors that at that point in demo day, it's not the right fit, or that's not like the kind of, company that they are looking to invest in, but you have now like built a network of possible investors for another product later down the line?
I mean, it's possible, but likely if they're not the right investor for you in that company, you're probably not going to have a very long conversation with them. So so that's less likely.
Okay.
But I mean, if you build a successful company and you are acquired for a lot of money, or you go public or something like that, a lot of investors are going to want to talk to you about your next company.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Because like the sales girl in me is just thinking about like when you go to a networking event, you're just trying to pick up as many like business cards as possible and keep them like in your back pocket for like something that, comes a product or something that you're like, oh, this is a good fit for that person.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, you want to be more targeted than that because like you're trying to close your round at that point. Like you've got. I mean, if you have no problem doing that, then sure you can mingle and like do that sort of stuff. But like your primary goal is, you have a target in mind. Let's say, I think we wanted to raise $500,000, right? And that's considered closing your round when you get to $500,000 of investment. That's your primary goal, and one of your founders is working solely on that goal until you do that, or until you decide, like let's say you only get to 400,000 and you decide, all right, we're going to stop there. Like then that becomes your round that you raised 400,000 instead.
Okay. So are there any other accelerators like YC out there? I mean, I've heard of some, but like for very niche companies or markets.
Yes and no. There are a ton of accelerators out there now. If you Google startup accelerators, you'll probably find hundreds of them. Are there any like YC? I've never gone through any of them. None of them have the same reputation that Y Combinator has. So I can't really answer that, but I can tell you, like, I have seen there's different models. So some invest like Y Combinator, some don't. Some are just, the advice portion of the equation. Some take different percentages of your company. They may invest. I don't think anybody else invests as much as Y Combinator currently does.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, when they upped it to 500,000, that was a pretty big increase. Some actually charge the company an amount to be in their accelerator.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say, stay away from those. You don't need to participate in that type of accelerator. Some do it and say like, you'll get it back if you complete the program or that, and they want to just make sure that you're dedicated. Invested. Yeah. I don't really buy that. I think they need to do a better job picking companies and picking people if they think that you might not be invested in building your company. Like,
yeah, interesting.
So yes, there's plenty of them out there. You can find others. I won't mention any specific names, but just do a Google search. You can find others.
Yeah. So kind of thinking about your own experience, maybe you can kind of talk about what you entered YC with, like your company, your idea, and just kind of talk a little bit more about like your personal story with YC. So, and you said that like one of the biggest things that they look for is that you're able to describe your product or your company to somebody who has no idea or like really isn't in the industry. So can you maybe like tell me what your company did and explain it to me like what Michael Scott says, explain to me like I'm 10.
Yeah. So this was a big challenge for us because our company did something very technical.
Yeah.
So our company, like the simplest way that I can explain it is our company helped software engineers who maintain open source software projects make money.
Okay. What do you mean by open source software products?
Open source software projects open source software means that the code is available on the internet to anybody who wants to use it. You can copy it to your own computer and you can run it yourself, or you can make changes to it.
Yeah.
If you want to make changes to the actual project itself, you can do that. You can submit change pull requests, and the maintainer is the person who decides, do I want to incorporate that into the project? They're the ones who build most of the things for the project. But there's something like 50 million active open source projects on GitHub, which is the largest like repository where they're all kept. Some of them are tiny and no one's using them, but a lot of them are being used by hundreds or thousands of businesses because what'll happen is a developer will, say they need to build something into their application, let's just say like some sort of widget for a mobile application. They could do it themselves, or they could look and see what somebody else has already created, and they can and they might say, oh wow, somebody's already done exactly what I need. I'm not going to spend all the time to build it myself. I'll just use this project, incorporate that package into my software, and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
The problem becomes, what if there's a bug with that package? Because you're using their code, somebody needs to fix that bug. What if you need a new feature? related to that package and it needs to be built into it, then the maintainer is in charge of all that stuff. And oftentimes they're not paid anything because they just create. It's like I write some code on my computer at home and I publish it out there, just like I publish an article, and someone else says, oh, I want to use that code too.
Yeah.
And then you end up getting, if you're lucky, I'm using lucky in quotes, if you're lucky, 100,000 companies are using your software.
Right.
But they're not paying you anything because it's free. Like, you just
Right.
put it out there. You didn't know that that many companies were going to use it.
Yeah.
But then they're all asking you to make changes to it and do things. And so we were trying to help that person create a sustainable business around their projects.
Yeah. And their skills and their time that they're spending on
And it's a lot of times, if it gets to be that big, it's not one person. Like they'll
have like a team.
yeah, other people will start making a lot of changes and they'll say, oh, do you want to join the team? Like, and so then you have co-maintainers of these projects. But like there's some massive projects, and some are run by companies. So like Google and Facebook and Twitter, like they all have these internal open source projects that, so in that case, these people are paid because they're employees of the company that create them.
Yeah.
But things like React, which is an open source JavaScript framework. Python and Ruby are like programming languages. They often have foundations around them that end up, because they're used by so many people, these foundations get developed around them. But there's so many others that you just don't have any funding.
Right.
Like Shotcut. I use a program called Shotcut to edit our videos for the podcast. That's an open source project.
Oh, okay.
Some of them are easier to monetize than others. Like if you can sell premium features, that's one monetization strategy. But yeah, so that's basically an overview of like what we were doing and what the industry is, what the problem is.
Okay. What made you think to go that route? Like, could you identify that problem yourself, or like, was there some research that you did? Like, was that always the idea that you wanted?
So my co-founder actually got that insight by talking to one of his contacts, and he brought it up with me, and we kind of just did some research in the space and decided that that's what we want. That was the idea we wanted to apply with. So that was the idea that we applied with. That was like the market that we applied with, and that's what we spent the whole 3 months working on.
Yeah.
That we were out there, and then the next year and a half or so.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it definitely addressed a problem, and it was something that was needed. So why did you leave?
It definitely addressed a problem. And one of the it was very interesting. So I spent most of my time in Y Combinator in the batch, like the 3 months we were there. And then when I came home, either writing code and, building the application that we were working on, or finding potential leads. So basically the maintainers of these software projects, we would scrape GitHub and basically find the email addresses for the maintainers that worked on these projects, reach out to them. And we had such a high percentage like hit rate of people who would take a call with us because they were interested in like
monetizing their work.
Yeah, the problem, like they felt the problem.
Yeah,
right. It wasn't that part was obvious.
Yeah.
And nobody was solving that problem for
Right.
them.
Right.
The challenge that we ran into was these weren't business people. And most of the time they had a job. So like they had another job unrelated to their project, which required most of their time. And a lot of the ways that they could have made money off of their project would have required a significant time investment. So it's almost like, well, I kind of need to get paid to replace my full-time salary, or I don't really want to get paid, anything for this. Like, and that was the other part of this is like culturally, a lot of the maintainers said, "Oh, I'd love to get paid to work on this project." But then when you told them the different options for how to get paid, it's like, well, we could help you actually partner with companies who use your platform, and you could charge them for premium support contracts to maintain and fix bugs and things like that. Or, some of them have premium feature requests they'd like you to build in. And the culture around open source is like, well, I don't know that I want companies to be able to set my roadmap for me. This is more of like a communal effort, and I like to set the roadmap based on what I think are the needs of the project. I don't want a company to be able to just pay me and say like, now you have to build this.
Yeah.
So there's like some different dynamics at play. And so it was very challenging. Like we made money. Like we had plenty of sales. We had plenty of customers, but we didn't figure out a way to scale it to like a venture-backed business.
Okay.
And that's what we were, that's what you sign up for when you do this. You're not building a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
You have to build a company that can be worth hundreds of millions or billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, you have to pivot. And so basically when it came time to like figure out what to pivot to, my co-founder had one idea that he wanted to pivot to that I wasn't really, that it just wasn't my ambition. It wasn't something I was passionate about or even like interested in,
or like knowledgeable.
Yeah, or knowledgeable.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to help.
Yeah.
And I think that was clear to both of us,
Right.
like that he wanted to sort of take this thing and run with it in a different direction. And so, I mean, I was able to exit. Like, he bought me out of the company, and it had been a year and a half of a grind. Like when especially if you're working on a startup that doesn't have product market fit, and you're trying to find it, it's exhausting.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, and we were doing that for a long time. So,
Yeah.
I was ready for a break and to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, that's very admirable to know when it's time and to focus on, other things so that's awesome. When you kind of talked about what you were doing while you were at Y Combinator, you kind of said that like you spent a lot of your time coding and then also like going after, a lot of potential customers and signing customers up. What would you say you really spent like most of your time doing? Was it that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. Like the YC events type stuff that I mentioned earlier is like part of YC was probably only like 5% of your time, right? Spent in those sorts of meetings and dinners and talks and that sort of stuff. I mean, the rest of probably 90% of the time was just either writing code and building something, or talking to customers, finding customers and talking to customers.
Yeah.
That's especially at that stage, that's all you can really do. And I mean, we worked probably, I don't know, 16, 18-hour days sometimes. I did try and go to the gym as often as I could. That was like my one escape.
That's
I would go to the gym
admirable.
for like an hour or something like that. And
Didn't you also have a bike?
I did. Well, yeah, I didn't have a car, so I rode my bike to the gym.
That's so San Francisco. Or
Yeah.
So Silicon Valley of you.
I was, I was basically like a college student.
Yeah.
Pretty
much. And
so
a dad.
yeah, we worked basically, just work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Yeah. So what would you say was your favorite part of YC?
The funding was pretty good.
Okay.
So, I mean, like there's
money driven. Just kidding.
No,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, like that makes things possible that, wouldn't otherwise be possible. So that's
totally. It's a door opener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, right. Like I was able to leave my job.
Right.
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 So that's helpful. Seeing that large amount of money hit your bank account is pretty crazy. But that's not like, that wasn't my favorite part. Like that's just
a cool thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most valuable part was probably the network. Just the network of founders, of partners that you're able to get advice from while you're there. They helped us shift our focus a couple of times and just think about different ideas. Also, the network has opened up to me other opportunities after Y Combinator. I've done consulting for people from Y Combinator. I've had job interviews with people from Y Combinator. Yeah, I got a job with a person that was a Y Combinator founder. So, that's all super helpful. Demo day was an amazing experience. I mean, pretty surreal.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure.
Also intense.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, no, but it's a good like life event to kind of put in your back pocket. I think it's really cool that you talk about the network. I mean, that is a huge thing. That's also, I think, the value of being able to move there for 3 months. Like some people are like, why would you do that? Especially now that like there's like all these like virtual components that you can do, but it really is like that face-to-face networking that you get And I think it's also cool. I mean, you had just mentioned recently you discovered that there's like a YC network here where we live, and they kind of get together sometimes. So
Yeah, there's I mean, basically there's so many companies now that there are so many founders that have been part of YC, that every city has a, you know, some number of founders that are living there. So I think here in Tampa, I think this is pretty new, but there's a former founder who got a group together. I think they're up to like 25 founders that, you know, will go out and get dinner and have drinks and talk about what they're up to now, companies they, you know, might, you know, they're thinking of starting, that sort of stuff.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a cool network to have.
Yeah, and Tampa actually recently, in the past 5 years or so, has become one of the big like startup like hubs in the United States. I mean, obviously, like Silicon Valley is definitely like the main one, but more startups had been moving to Tampa.
Yeah, more are. I wouldn't call it one of the big startup hubs in the United States,
I have
but
a lot
Miami,
of pride.
Miami likes to consider themselves one, and it's definitely a bigger startup scene than Tampa. But it's growing. You know, there's some promise there.
I've heard, definitely. All right, and so for every good thing, there's always an area of improvement or development. So what would you say was your least favorite part of being in YC?
I hear you pose that question to people who are interviewing for your company.
It's my favorite.
My least favorite part of YC was being away from home. Well, I mean, I had you and we had a 2-year-old at the time.
I know.
So, you know, being out there for 3 months was pretty challenging. So yeah, that was the most difficult part. I mean, but I think it was also a necessary part.
For sure.
Yeah. You know, I mean, participating in the program and building your company at that level is just such an intense experience that like you can't be home and present for your spouse and child. Like it's really difficult to, you know, there just would have been expectations that I wouldn't have been able to fulfill.
Right.
So,
I mean, like even if you were to have done all of that, but like still like lived in Tampa, I probably wouldn't see you still as much as like you just like moving away because of like how time intensive it was. No, I totally get that. And some people have asked me like, you know, how did it feel with like Tony moving away for 3 months? And we only had one kid. It wasn't like now with 2.
Luckily he was pretty good.
He was an
as
awesome
far as kids
kid.
go.
Yeah, well, he had a thing, but yeah, I mean, but he was awesome. And one person with one kid is really not that hard. Honestly, the dog was the hardest part.
You're just making excuses. It was challenging. Like this.
I didn't think so. No.
Okay, fine. You're the one who was here.
Yeah.
I'll do it again.
Well, the dog was hard. The dog weighs more than I do, and walking him, because he's your dog. Like I love our dog, but like, you know, you're the one that always used to walk him, and so he went a little rogue on me while you were gone. So
he walked you a few times.
Yeah. There were times I was like dragged across the lawn. Like, darn it.
So I mean, it was an incredible experience. Not since college did I have the experience of like moving away somewhere by myself, right? Like this was
that's true.
This was like that kind of experience. Like I was in a different place. I had been to San Francisco, but I never lived there.
Yeah.
You know, and it was an amazing experience, but it was very challenging.
Yeah, but when you were living out there, did you even have time? Because like we know people that were out in San Francisco. Did you have time to meet up with people? No,
I don't think I met up with anybody that we know until after the program was over.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, no, that's not true. I did meet up with a friend from college, maybe once or twice. And actually, my brother Matt came out and visited for one weekend. So my co-founder and I both, his girlfriend actually came the same weekend to visit. So we both took that one weekend off, and I went to the Bruins were playing the Sharks, so we went to San Jose and saw a game, and then we went out to one night we went out to some bars and stuff. Yeah. And that was basically all of the the fun time I had.
Right.
Fun, like traditional fun time I
Yeah.
had while I was out there.
Well, it's hard. Yeah. When you're doing so much. I mean, were you able to, did you meet anyone famous while you were like living in San Francisco?
It depends on your definition of famous.
So like no one from Bravo TV or The Bachelor for me?
No, actually, I mean, I did meet one very famous person.
Oh,
But met in terms of like saying hello. Like, so
still.
at Demo Day, what happens is all of the founders go into this building first. And then, so you're there first. And then over time between, the 30 minutes or so before the event starts, all the investors start coming in. And so you're waiting for the investors to come in and you're kind of networking and stuff. And all of a sudden, I saw this person, this guy who looked very familiar. And I was like, I think that's Joe Montana.
Oh, so you put your finger on it right away.
Yeah. Like, no, like he's a very recognizable guy. And like he was, somebody that I knew growing up playing football, like that,
Right.
watching football. So I was like, I think that's Joe Montana. And so I Googled Joe Montana and like found out what he's doing. And I didn't know that he was a partner at a VC firm. And I think he still is. So, that's what he's up to after football.
Yeah.
I think he has his own wine label too. But yeah, so
Don't they all?
I didn't really meet him, but I saw him there. I said hi to him.
Cool.
But I mean, there are plenty of like tech famous people that I met at Y Combinator. Michael Seibel, the founder of one of the founders of Twitch, and he was the CEO of Y Combinator while I was there. Met him. Paul Buchheit was the creator of Gmail at Google.
Oh.
He's a partner at Y Combinator.
And Google, like the Google headquarters was like right there too.
Yeah. So YC's office was in Mountain View and Google's headquarters is there. I think they just recently moved it into the city of San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
So, people like that. I met plenty of like, tech famous, like founder type people. I think those people are pretty cool.
Oh, you go geek out over that. That's great. Good. Awesome. So looking back at this, like, what would you say are like the top qualities of someone who would be successful at YC? If you were to think of 3 things that if somebody is like listening and was like, I wonder if I could, make it, or if I have the chops to make it at NYC, what would you say are like maybe the 3 most important things?
Okay, I'm going to give them to you, not necessarily in a specific order.
I wouldn't expect it. It's okay.
So one is at least somebody on the team should be technical, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to build something, right?
Okay.
Like you're building a company and you're creating something, whether it's writing code for software or building hardware for whatever you're working on. Like you've got to have the technical knowledge to be able to do that.
Okay.
So like, I mean, hand in hand with that is probably resourceful, right? Like you're not going to know how to do everything.
Right.
And you can't be the type of person who's going to say, well, I don't know how to do that, so, I give up. You're going to run into so many challenges that you're going to have to just figure out. And that's what like software engineers do every day.
Yeah.
Like you get stuck somewhere and you Google and you figure out how to fix it, how to solve it.
Right.
And that's a specific type of person who can do that and wants to do that and like enjoys that.
Yeah. Right.
And then determination, or like you have to be relentlessly determined basically because you're going to hit so many walls.
Right.
You're going to feel like you're drowning, like you're failing because you are. And you have to, but you have to have this vision that you're, striving towards and keep going towards that because like there's going to be great days where like, oh, I got this big sale or like, oh, we finished this feature that we've been working on for a long time. And then there's going to be like terrible days and weeks, stretches where nothing good is happening and you're running out of money and you're banging your head against the wall because you can't figure out how to get more customers or like explain. Yeah. I mean, like you're not converting enough customers, enough prospects into customers or, whatever. You're going to have all these problems.
Right.
And you just have to keep working through that. Right. And like, you just have to, if you stop you die, right?
Right.
Like, and your job is to not let your company die.
Right.
And
right.
so, you have to make your money last as long as you can until you find that product market fit.
Yeah.
And, can really like step on the gas
Right.
and just pour money on that thing.
Right.
Until then, like Y Combinator likes to say, you have to live like a cockroach, right? Like
That's so fun. I've heard this.
you
Not
should be,
from YC, but like I've heard people use it.
yeah. Like you should be, eating ramen noodles and not like the kind that you can go out, like now there's like fancy ramen noodles. This is like the cupo noodles.
Just add water.
Yeah. Like, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and this is easier for people who are just out of college, right?
Yeah.
Because they're used to that.
Right.
Right.
They're used to ramen noodles.
Yeah. I mean, it gets harder as you get older and, more accustomed to a certain lifestyle.
For sure. Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I never really enjoyed that lifestyle anyway, so it wasn't too much of a change. But.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, like all jobs have that ebb and flow of like highs and lows. It's obviously magnified so much more when you have so much at stake and you're a startup and like, your money is literally like dwindling down. But
right.
It's good to know that like if you are in a stage of life right now where like, you're still seeing that like ebb and flow of highs and lows, it could be something that you'd be able to do and that you can do. You just have to have that like grit to be able to persevere. So knowing that, would you do it again?
In a heartbeat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not now, probably. I wouldn't do it while our kids are, while we have a 3-year-old.
A 4-year-old?
He's almost 4.
No, I mean, like, would you do it when he turns 4? Like, what's the cap?
No, I don't know. No, probably not in the next couple of years, but yeah, I would do it again. I mean, take that out of the equation for sure. Like 100%, I'd do it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
If, for the right idea with the right team and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's such a valuable experience. I mean, I wouldn't not recommend it to anybody who has these ambitions.
Right. So would you be comfortable being that 50-year-old in a sea of youngers?
I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're cool the way you are.
No, I just don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, if you can build a company and I wouldn't do it by myself. That would be another thing that I would advise people. One, your chances of getting into Y Combinator are very low as a solo founder. Mm-hmm. They're not zero, but they're super low. Mm-hmm. Also, it's just really hard to build a company by yourself. Like, you're responsible for everything.
Right.
And
it's a lot. Yeah,
you should find somebody with complementary strengths and skills
for sure
to work on with you. At least one person, maybe two. Mm-hmm. I think 2 or 3 founders is probably ideal. So yeah, I wouldn't do it by myself, but I would, if I had the right team of people and like something that I was passionate about, and I would do it.
Yeah.
I'd do it again.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. Like, again, I feel like I just rediscovered a whole nother side of you. I've heard most of this before, but it is really like, it's almost re-energizing to hear you and your passion for startups and knowing that, it's not over for you. And so I think that's like a really exciting thing to think about. And
it's not over for any of us.
No, it's not. It's not over till it's over.
There you go. I will say, if anybody has any other questions, like just wants to know anything else about my experience or anything about Y Combinator that I would be able to answer, feel free to reach out. You can reach out on social media. You can DM me on Instagram. Whenever Threads gets that feature, you can DM me there. I'm tonydotcoms on both. Yeah, and if you get to the interview stage in Y Combinator and you're listening to this, reach out. I would be happy to do a mock interview with you.
And if there are any spouses or girlfriends or boyfriends of potential founders that want to know what it's like for their partner to be in Y Combinator, reach out to me.
Okay, everyone, you're probably wondering why podcasters are always like, hit the subscribe button, means a lot. We'd really appreciate it. So if you don't know, more subscribers means more listeners to the podcast. Each episode, it's more likely that you're going to download a future episode. Also in the charts, that helps a podcast to grow, to get more listeners, to be presented in front of a larger audience. Only about half or even less than half of the people who listen to the podcast each week are subscribed. So hit that subscribe button or that follow button. It will help the podcast to get more attention. It will help make sure that we keep giving it the attention that it needs to create a quality podcast that you all will hopefully continue to love. So hit that button. That's all we'll ask.
All right. It's getting late. But before we go, do you know what time it is?
I do. I always do.
What time is it, Tony?
It is time for our Hot Mom of the Week.
Yeah, whoa, last time I checked, I'm still hot, real hot.
That was really good. You did
I
a
can't
good job
believe
with
you
that.
threw it over to me.
Yeah.
I was a little bit like thrown off, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
I like to mix things up a little bit. I don't.
one out of every 12 times.
There you go. So we were talking a lot about entrepreneurs and, investors. And honestly, I really wanted to highlight trending mom that was a, big venture capital investor. But I pulled up a list of like some of the best ones to find, and either they were all men or they were, or the two women that I found on the list were not trending. So they didn't have a huge following.
Got it.
So
that is one of the problems with the VC industry.
Yeah, I was going to say
very
we
male
got to
dominated.
step that up. But and we will get there. So I had already been following somebody named Bryiana Dyrdek, and I don't know if you are familiar with that last name.
I am, only because I listened to, so there's this podcast that I listen to from time to time called My First Million.
Yeah.
And they interviewed Rob Dyrdek a couple months ago, and I think he mentioned who his wife was, or I just found out who his wife was. But anyway, yes, that's Rob Dyrdek's wife, right?
Yes,
okay.
yeah. So Bryiana is married to former pro skateboarder Rob Dyrdek, who's now an entrepreneur and an investor through his venture studio, Dyrdek Machine.
Okay, but I do not know anything about her.
Okay.
So I only knew that she was married to Rob Dyrdek.
Yes, right. And she's made more of a name for herself than just, the wife of Rob Dyrdek. So good for her.
I'm excited to learn what that is.
Yeah, so she is an internationally published model and beauty, and she's like in the beauty pageant circuit. But she comes from a very hard childhood and upbringing. So majority of her life, she was mentally, sexually, and physically abused. So she's had to overcome a lot to get to the place that she's at right now. At 10 years old, she was diagnosed with a life-threatening rare blood disease, and she was told she would only have a few days to live without a bone marrow transplant. So it got to the point where Make-A-Wish granted her a childhood wish, and that wish was to go to Hawaii and swim with the dolphins.
Oh.
So when that happened, she kind of embraced what is it called when you say it out loud and you put it out there in the universe?
Oh, like when you manifest something?
Yes, yeah. So she embraced the idea of manifesting a better life for herself. And because she was like, wow, I'm here in Hawaii, I'm enjoying, and she was 10, I'm here in Hawaii and I'm enjoying this so much.
I wish I was manifesting things when I was 10.
I know. Imagine where we would be. I think I manifested an extra cupcake or something and then it happened. But she was like, I'm here in Hawaii, this is a really great life. I need to have more of these experiences. So, obviously she's our hot mom of the week. So she's still here today. And she overcame so much. And she now is the founder of Iconic Beauty, which is a female empowerment brand that encourages women in personal and professional endeavors to kind of just uplift and inspire each other, just this network of a sisterhood. And she started that brand, and she's also just a really trending content creator. She's really just embraced everything that's trending, really. One of her first TikToks, she introduced herself with a Get Ready With Me, which is a trending like thing that they do on TikTok. It's just basically like these women or these men that like are putting makeup on and getting ready and telling a story, and like these things go viral because you're seeing their, you know, beauty regimen, and then you're also listening to their story. So she did a Get Ready With Me to introduce who she is. She mentioned her zodiac sign, her Enneagram, her Myers-Briggs.
She's right up your alley.
Yeah,
wow.
I know. She said all of the things that like are identifiers and, you know, things that we would say. And one of the things that just is kind of new, like, so last year she was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So, and she was like 30 something, you know, she was in her 30s.
Wow.
So she learned to live with like kind of like this late diagnosis. And at first when she received the diagnosis, she was, you know, ashamed. She shared it with some of her closest friends and it was not received well. So she was worried about it. But now she's just like so public about it and has embraced it. And it's become a part of who she is. And she's learned how to, you know, live with autism, and it's been beautiful and awesome.
Yeah, that must be really interesting to be diagnosed in your 30s, because you can probably think back to all these life experiences that you had, and you can be like, oh, like
right.
This maybe explains why, or something like that, or like, you know, then you can sort of think like, well, if this happens again, maybe.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing that her form of autism is not like very severe if she didn't know until she was in her 30s.
Right. Yeah. So, and that is one of the things, is that like, it just paints a clearer picture of who you are,
right.
and what you can do in life, you know, based on the things that you have. So, she's super inspirational. I mean, she's overcome a lot to be where she is right now. And yeah, her husband just so happens to be an entrepreneur and an investor. And that is the link to, but it could very well step into that role at any point too. So, you know, we have our eye on Bryiana. So go ahead and follow her. She is Bryiana Dyrdek on both TikTok and Instagram. And it is not spelled the way you think. So it is at BRYIANADYRDEK.
Well, that's all we've got today. If you enjoyed the episode, hit the subscribe button.
And reach out on social media.
.coms
And Hot Moms.
signing off.